Welcome to the Stepmom Side with Alicia Crasco, the podcast for stepmoms ready to create the life they want and one they actually have a say in. Here we talk all things stepmom life and just a little bit more. Leave the superficial conversations at the door and get ready for perspective shifts and actionable advice to help you on your way to creating the life you want, one step at a time. Hey, welcome to this week's podcast episode, all about creating connections with your stepkids. And this is something that I have gotten questions on quite often. Yeah, a lot of questions. We'll dive into it. But if you are struggling with connecting with your stepkid, just know that you're not alone. There are so many stepmoms that are like, I am struggling. Like, how do I navigate this? How do I get through like being a stepmom and building a connection with them when there's so much pressure to like perform and show up and be a stepmom and be great and do all the right things and show up, but like not too much and take a step back, but not too much. There's so much that goes into being a stepmom and like trying to build a relationship with a kid that you've just met or you've only been around for a little bit. And I think that's the hardest part. Like I said, we'll get into it. So when I met my stepkids, they were 8 and 11. Now they are 20 and 23, so like out of the house. So I've been through a lot of ages as a stepmom. And I think something that's really hard is when you come into a stepmom role and you don't have children of your own, and then you're like, okay, I've got to build a relationship with these kids. But there's also so much pressure. There's so much pressure as a stepmom to build a relationship. It's not like you are seeing your niece or nephew, or you're seeing your friends as kids, or you're seeing your neighbors' kids, or you're a teacher, or a counselor, or a speech therapist, or an occupational therapist, whatever. Like, it's so much different when you come in as a stepmom and you're trying to build a relationship with these kids because if they don't like you, it's because you're a terrible stepmom and you're not trying too much, or you're not trying hard enough. But if they do really like you, it's because you're overstepping and you're trying to take the place of the mom. So there's all of these like weird nuances about being a stepmom that like any other time like it just happens naturally. So like I said, my stepkids were young when I met them. And I definitely felt that pressure. And I didn't have kids of my own, but I've always liked kids. I've always enjoyed them, and typically they liked me. But there are these outside factors, and it's almost like this, like turf war, if you will, of like, okay, if you like her, then you don't like them, or like for them, like if you like Alicia, then maybe you're not as close to your mom or whatever, and not necessarily put on them by their own mom, but other people, like extended family or society or friends or whatever. And there's so many nuances that it's like, I just want to show up and like have a good relationship with everyone. Why does it have to be this crazy thing? Like, can't we everyone just get along? Like, can't they just like me to like me? I don't know. Like, it would just be so much easier that way. But here's the deal. Here's why it's important to build emotional connections within your step family. And here's why I always talk about connection over correction, because here's how I explain it in coaching calls. If I am friends with you and I make a joke at your expense, you're gonna be like, oh, Alicia, that's funny. But if I'm not friends with you, or more importantly, if I don't like you, or if I've been told negative things about you and I make a joke at your expense, wait, hold on. If I like you, or if you like me and I make a joke at your expense, you're gonna be like, oh, Alicia, that's funny. But if you don't like me, or if you've been told negative things about me, you're gonna be like, she's just a bitch or she's a jerk or whatever, right? And so it's kind of the same thing with your stepkids. Like, connect with them before you do any sort of correction. Because if you connect with them, they've got a relationship with you, they've got history with you, they've got that bond with you, or they're starting to form that bond with you. Maybe you guys aren't super close. And just to be clear, like, that's not the end game. The end game is not for you guys to be like thick as thieves and best friends and everyone is just like kumbaya and the Brady Bunch. That's not the goal. The goal is just for you guys to like be cordial and get along. If you turn into like the Brady Bunch, or if you turn into loving in them and they love you and all of that, that's great. That's just gravy on top. But if you come in heavy-handed and you try to correct them, about anything without building that connection, there's a good chance that they're going to be like, who the hell do you think you are just coming in here and doing and saying whatever it is that you're doing and saying? And it's probably not going to go that well with your partner because if you guys aren't getting along, there's going to be tension between you and your partner about whatever is happening between you and your kids. And if you find yourself nodding along, like, oh my God, you're right, that means that you've been there and you get it. But I get it. Like, I've also been there. So, I'll give you an example like with my stepson because he's been here like part-time and he's also been here like full-time. So early on in my journey as a stepmom, like I didn't feel super confident to call a spade a spade. And part of the reason was because I did just that, like black is black, white is white. There is no in between, like right is right and wrong is wrong, right? And my husband would always be like, Alicia, we need to work on your delivery. We need to be a little more diplomatic. And I'm like, why? Everyone knows where they stand. And he's like, yeah, and it's not always a good thing. And I was like, whatever, sounds like a them problem. And then I was like, oh, okay, we don't have to like destroy everything. We don't have to blow up all of the bridges just to get our point across. So once I worked on like my delivery, I can say, hey, can you clean your room? I don't have to be like, I told you to clean your room 5 minutes ago and you haven't done anything. Completely different delivery. Or giving them an option like, hey, when do you think you're going to get to cleaning your room? In 5 minutes, in 10 minutes? Like, what does that look like? So when my this is kind of a funny story. When my stepson moved in, or before he lived here full time, like this was he was like 9 or 10, so it was like early on. And I lived by myself before being married and like having stepkids here, like in the house. And the house was clean, immaculate, if you will. Like you could eat off the floors, and then you add in kids, and like that is not the case. And so he had these Nerf guns, and I hated the Nerf guns, hated them because there'd be Nerfs everywhere. They'd like be in the couch, in the carpet, the fireplace, they were everywhere. And I was just like, if I have to pick up one more Nerf, I'm gonna lose my mind. And so I asked him, I don't know how many times to pick up his Nerfs. So I finally said to him, if you don't pick up all of these Nerfs, I'm going to pick them up and they're going in the trash. I will throw them away. And he was like, oh God, I think she's serious. And I was serious. And now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, that was so terrible. But then once he moved in full time and like we had that relationship, we already had the relationship because I'd been in the picture for quite a while. But now he like lives here full time. I would say things like that to him, like, if you don't pick up your sweatshirts, I'm gonna throw them all away. And he'd be like, whatever. Like, no, you're not. Like he knew that I wouldn't throw them away, but it was just like our way of like bantering back and forth. So I said the same thing, like, if you don't pick these up, I'm gonna throw them away. And he's like, whatever, Alicia, like rolls his eyes because like he obviously knows that I'm joking. But before he knew me, he'd be like, oh my God, she's actually gonna throw them away. So it is important to like build that relationship, build that rapport because things can be taken wrong so many ways. And you're a stepmom. Like, of course you know that, right? And here is one practical strategy for you to connect with your stepkids. Get to know them outside of your partner, outside of their sibling, outside of just being your stepkid. And here are ways that I did that. Like I would take my stepdaughter to get her nails done, or we'd traveled together, or we'd gone on like a road trip together, like one by airplane and like one like traveling like once by airplane and like a road trip, like car, like we drove like hours and hours and like spent the night in a hotel and like drove the rest of the way. But get to know them outside of your partner. And I think that's where like the weirdness is because you're trying to connect with this child that like you don't really know or you're trying to get to know them. But then there's this filter of their parent that's like in the way of like, how is this going to happen? So get to know what do they like? What do they not like? What are they interested in? What kind of foods do they like? What sports are they in? And if you're like, oh, Alicia, I already know what they like. I already know what they're interested in. But I don't want to hear about it because I don't like video games. I don't like video games either. But I used to sit and watch my stepson play video games. I don't like to be in the sun for hours on end, but I would go and watch my stepdaughters like rowing stuff. There's a lot of things that I didn't like to do, but it was important for me to build that connection, build that relationship with my stepkid that I would just go and do it because I wanted to get to know them. I wanted to have a relationship with them outside of their parent, outside of my partner. And I didn't want that relationship tainted, not really like tainted because that makes it sound bad, but like filtered like through my husband. Like I wanted to have a relationship with them or like something to talk about with them, outside of my partner, like facilitating, like, hey, tell us about this or tell us about that. And I think that's something that we also, and maybe this is just me, but when I was trying to get to know my stepkids, I would just ask them like rapid fire interrogation questions. I don't recommend that. It does not go well. You can ask conversations, ask questions conversationally. Don't ask them like rapid fire interrogation style. Like, no one likes that. But just get to know them outside of your partner. Spend time with them as counterproductive as you might think that this is. Like, spend time with them outside of your house doing something with just them. I promise you, the dynamic inside your house is totally different than if you get them outside of your house, whether it's driving, whether it's going out for ice cream, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's, going to watch a sporting event, whatever it is, just get them outside of your house. I promise you it's different because whatever weirdness you feel inside your house, they also feel it. Kids just do. Like, for whatever reason, kids absolutely just feel it. So get to know your stepkid outside of your partner. And before you're like, oh, Alicia, I don't want to do that, please just try it. Try it for 3 weeks, 21 days, and just try to make a habit of spending time with them one on one, individually, to like get to know just them. So let's talk about navigating challenges since I just talked about that a little bit. There are going to be times where you're like, this feels like a chore. This feels like one more thing that I'm trying. This feels like I'm bashing my head against a wall. This feels like I'm not getting anywhere. This feels like my stepchild is rejecting me. Okay, so let's talk about it. Those are common things that I hear in coaching. Like, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. And I'm like, I understand. But also, you've got to understand from the child's perspective. Let's say that you guys haven't had the best relationship. Let's do worst case scenario. Let's say you guys haven't had the best relationship. And then all of a sudden you decide, okay, I'm going to be like super stepmom and I'm going to like do everything that they like to do. Well, that's weird. That's very weird. That's very, very weird. If there's somebody that I didn't like and then all of a sudden they were like, oh, Alicia, and they're like all into like what I'm into, I'm going to be like, what are your motives? Why are you doing this? What, what's the agenda? What are you doing here? It's very, very, very weird. So before you get your panties in a bunch about how your stepkid is rejecting you or how they're not taking to your offers, look back, do a little bit of reflecting and think like, okay, what was our relationship like before I started trying to like be extra nice to them or like go out of my way to like be around them or show interest in them. And if it wasn't that great, then maybe understand like, okay, it's going to take me a minute to get them to warm up. So there's that. Second thing, getting them to warm up. This isn't like a one and done thing. You can't just go and be like, oh yeah, I am going to spend time trying to get to know my stepkid. And then this week, and then next week when they come back, we're going to be right back at like square number 10. No, you're not. There's a good chance that you're going to be back at square one or square like -1, -2, -10. There's a good chance that you're going to revert back to zero because, as you know, transition days are really hard. But then if you're trying to build a new relationship and last week was just your first time or the last time you saw them was your first time, and that's, we're not even getting into like super complicated custody schedules, that that good feeling or that good vibe or that good relationship that you had while your stepkid was there last time might not have like come back with them because they have more memories of things not going well. So that's what they're going to like revert to. Like, oh, I have to go back to see Alicia and like we don't really actually get along that well, right? It's going to take a while to like change that negative narrative. Same thing for you. Like it's going to take a while to change that negative narrative of like, oh, I don't like my stepkid. It's not that you don't necessarily like your stepkid. There's a very good chance that you may not, in fact, like your stepkid. But instead of like, I don't like them, I don't like them, I don't like them, you can, what I do like about them, and maybe it's something as simple as like their shirt, the shirt that they're wearing, or maybe you like their haircut, or maybe you like that they're really funny, or maybe you like that they're compassionate or kind, or whatever it is, or maybe you guys have a similar interest in sports or whatever hobbies you have, maybe you guys share them too. But it's going to take a while for you also to change that negative narrative, just like it's going to take them time to change that negative narrative. So every time that they come back, you might be starting back over at zero or less than zero. Give it time. Keep trying because you need to change your habits. They also need to change their habits. And expect that, another thing, expect that things are going to go really, really well for a while. And then all of a sudden, you're going to hit a roadblock and you're going to want to throw your arms up and be like, what the hell? Like, I've done all of this work for the last 6 months. I've done really great work. And then this week, I've been rejected by them. Totally normal. Totally normal. Totally normal. And there's a good chance that if they're rejecting you, it has nothing to do with you. It could be that they don't like you for sure, 100%. That's totally possible. But they've had a bad day at week. Maybe they had a bad day at school. Maybe they, got into a fight with their friend. Maybe they didn't do so well on a test. Maybe they're fighting with their other house. Maybe sports practice didn't go that well. Maybe they're just in a mood. Like we have funks too, right? Like everyone's human. Like maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe, just maybe, has nothing to do with you. So before you're like, forget it, I've done everything that I can do. I've been rejected now. Give them a little bit of grace. And here's what I say to you when you are struggling with the rejection or struggling with being back at ground zero or less than. If you're in the stepmom side community, come in and just be like, hey, I had a really tough week with my stepkids. Here's what happened. I, thought that I'd made all this progress. This is what happened. And get some help, get some advice, like a sounding board that you can just like go to. Because here's the thing, going to your partner about their kids and how much you don't like them or potentially hate them at that moment is not going to serve you well. What it's going to do is drive a wedge in your relationship with your partner. And then you're gonna be like, all we ever do is fight about the kids. Your partner, please hear me loud and clear. Your partner does not deserve to hear every single thing that you think. They do not deserve to know every single thing that you think. Just like you don't deserve to know every single thing that they think. As much as like you think that that might be great, it's actually not. But if you're struggling, come into the community, find a stepmom friend, find a friend that understands. It's really hard to find somebody that understands unless they are a stepmom. If you're like, this is something that I've been struggling with for a long time, come and get coaching. Like, let's work through this. Don't do this alone because you're going to be miserable for however long. If you are sitting here right now thinking, like, okay, Alicia, I only have 7 more years to get through this. I only have 3 more years to get through this. I have 6 months to get through this. And then my stepkids are out of the house. My friend, listen to me. It is not over when they get out of the house. It is not over because there is college, marriages, babies, buying houses, all of the things. And then God forbid something happens. Like there's a lot of things that once the kids get out of the house, they're going to have to deal with. So get some help, get a support system in place so you've got support when you need it, when things are hard. And here's the thing, I understand when you're like, but I'm the only one struggling. Everyone else likes their stepkids. No, they don't. No, they don't. I would be lying to say I have loved my stepkids, or I've liked them because I do love them. Hit or miss on the days, right? Same thing with my own daughter, though. There are days where I'm like, oh my gosh. But you're not required to like them 100% of the time. You probably don't even like your partner 100% of the time. That's okay. It's normal. And you know what? Your stepkids probably don't like you 100% of the time. That's okay. But let me ask you this. If you were your stepkids, would you like you 100% of the time? Or are there things that you could do differently? Are there times where you've shown up and been like, ooh, maybe that wasn't like my best thing? Or have you said things that you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I shouldn't have like made that face. And I don't know about you, but like I wear my heart on my sleeve. And if my heart is not on my sleeve, it is on my face. And you can see it. It doesn't matter how nice I pretend or try to pretend. That's why I don't even try to pretend because my face will say everything. It gives every single thing away. But here's the thing. I want you to know that bonding with your stepkids or trying to like get that connection is really, really hard. So go slow. Go very, very slow. Slower. Even slower. So go slower than you think that you should go and give it time. If the separation or the divorce was contentious, there's a good chance that there's like negative feelings. If there have been things that have been said about you, the kids probably aren't going to warm up to you very easily. It's okay. It's totally normal. It has nothing to do with you, unless, of course, it does have something to do with you. But give everyone a little bit of time to come around. Try not to get overwhelmed. Try not to be exhausted by this. Try not to overthink it. Try not to do all of those things. But here's the deal. I'm a stepmom coach. I've been through this as a stepmom. I'm here for you. I'm rooting for you. If you are struggling with this, send me a message on Instagram. I'm just at Alicia Crasco, or come see me inside the community. I would love to help you navigate this, but you're not alone. Just know that it takes a while to get through it. There are going to be trials and tribulations. There are going to be hard times. Those are totally normal. Like I've said, sometimes it feels like 20 steps forward and one step forward and like 20 steps back. It's okay. It's okay if you have to start over. It's okay if you struggle. It's okay if you fail. It's okay if you stumble. Get back up. You're going to be okay. It's okay. Give yourself a little bit of grace. Give yourself a little bit of compassion. Give yourself a little bit of kindness. And here's what I want to leave you with. If you had a friend come to you, let me start that part over. If you had a friend come to you and say, "Hey, I'm really struggling with this. I'm really struggling with my stepkid. I'm really struggling with like building a connection with them. I'm really struggling with bonding with them." What would you say to them? You wouldn't say, "Hey, you're an idiot. Like, it's not that hard. Just do it." Like, how terrible of a person could you be? They're just kids. Like, why don't you just love them? That's not what you would say. You would be compassionate to them. You would be kind to them. You would say, "Yeah, it is hard sometimes. Here are things that I've done. Here are things that I've tried." So the next time that you find yourself like down and out about what you're going through, think about how you would talk to a friend and turn that back to you and give that love to yourself. Give yourself time, space, and grace to navigate this. You're not alone, but I will chat with you next week. Thanks for taking time to listen to this week's episode. If anything was helpful or resonated with you, please share it on social media and tag me. I'm just at Alicia Crasco. And if you could leave a 5-star rating and review while you're at it, that would also be really helpful. And if you find yourself struggling with your stepmom journey and you want a little bit more support without the hefty price tag of coaching, you might want to check out the Stepmom Side community, which is my own private community for stepmoms, where you get to connect with other stepmoms around the world and myself, where I hold weekly office hours and monthly group coaching. It's kind of like you have your own personal coach in your own back pocket. Again, without that hefty price tag. See you next week.